Right, welcome to part 2 of this lecture. The software that I use to do this only lets me record in 15-minute intervals. So this will be the last video for the introduction. Okay, so our next tissue is the nervous tissue. So what we know about the nervous tissue is that it is going to send stimuli and rapidly send signals around the body. This is very important so that we can respond to emergencies, that we can just simply respond to temperature changes in the environment, whatever it may be, sunlight coming into your eyes, or being able to read this screen. So the nervous system is going to be specialized to sense those stimuli, rapidly transmit information, and then parts of the brain then are going to be interpreting that information. So our nerves, spinal cord, brain, receptors, even things like taste buds, the semicircular canals in the ear have nervous tissue associated with that. And so what we're going to do is just simply say that the basic cell is a neuron, and learn more about the nervous system as we get to that system in class. Okay, so I did want to touch upon some other material that we're learning in Module 4, including some of the systems. One of the things that you're going to learn more about is gas exchange. So whether we're talking about an earthworm, or we're talking about a human, or even a ray-finned fish, we know that as a byproduct of cellular respiration, we make CO2. To do cellular respiration and get that energy we need in the form of ATP, we have to have oxygen. So what we're going to see with gas exchange is really the integration of several different systems. The two main systems will be the circulatory system and the respiratory system. In general, we're thinking about the respiratory system is responsible for bringing in oxygen and eliminating CO2, however that organism may do it. There are different ways to do that. Gas exchange meaning different kinds of organs and anatomical parts. The second thing is that we're going to have a circulatory system that picks up that oxygen, delivers it to the tissues, and picks up CO2 and brings it back. As you already know, there are open circulatory systems and closed circulatory systems, and even some organisms that didn't have circulatory systems, okay? So we can see various degrees of sophistication in the type of circulatory systems. So one of those ways to do gas exchange, well, not one of those ways, but the way that we do it is through respiratory surfaces. So this is showing us a raccoon and showing us basically deep within the branches of the lung where there are what we call the alveoli or air sacs, and they terminate at this mucous membrane, and at that mucous membrane, oxygen is going to cross into the capillary and CO2 is going to be released. So this is how we do it in our land animals. So one thing to know is that respiratory surfaces are thin and moist, usually just a single layer thick, and this allows those gases to move from regions of high concentration to low concentration, which we call diffusion. Okay, so one respiratory surface that we see is involved in gas exchange is that thin, wet membrane of things like earthworms. So basically using the skin as the mechanism to cross those respiratory gases. Okay, so that's one way. You're going to see that in things like earthworms, there's no specialized gas exchange surfaces. It's just simply the skin. There's going to be another animal that's going to use this type of what we call pulmocutaneous circulation, and that is going to be the amphibians. Okay, next we see that another way or another modification, if you will, of respiratory surfaces is in gills. So what we see here in gills, if you look under the hard bony flap right here of this fish, is called the operculum. Underneath that are going to be the gills. And those gills basically are convolutions or folded membranes where capillaries are going to bring blood. So where the capillaries are coming into the gills, they are bringing carbon dioxide, and that is going to diffuse across that membrane and the gills into the water, and the oxygen that's dissolved in the water that is going to pass over through into the gills. Okay, so most aquatic animals, including aquatic snails, are going to use gills. You might remember in clams, they're going to have gills as well. So this operculum, this hard bony structure that I highlighted in yellow, it actually does this. So you see fish in your tank going, and that's basically that operculum enhancing what we call ventilation, or the movement of those gases. Another way to have a respiratory surface is what we call tracheal systems. So in something like a cockroach, a cricket, most of our insects actually have the tracheal system. What you're going to have is basically just open airways. So if you look at the outside of insects, you can actually see just a hole, like somebody pushed a straight pin into the organism's abdomen, and those pores open into these just open airways, if you will. So there's no circulatory system involvement. It's just simply those gases moving from regions of high concentration to low concentration. So CO2 accumulates in the organism's body, so it's going to move to the lower concentration, which is in these tracheal airways, and then oxygen being in higher concentration outside the body. In the air, it's a higher composition of air. Oxygen in the air outside the body is going to move through the trachea to the tissues, because oxygen is naturally going to be lower there. So it just tells you trachea are extensive branching internal tubes that terminates in moist respiratory surfaces. So basically there's gas exchange directly with cells, not through something like blood. All right, so lungs. Again, we saw in the previous slide just this idea of a thin, moist membrane. So that is deep in the alveoli, or deep in the lungs, in the alveoli or the air sacs. Okay, so we know that there are two major kinds of circulatory systems, open or closed. Circulatory systems involve a pump, which is a heart, and it involves some sort of fluid. And you're usually thinking about what we call blood. And then you have a set of vessels. So in an open system, you notice that, sure, here's a heart. Here's another heart. You see they have a little opening in the top. So it looks like here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hearts. And then it opens into a vessel, but then the vessel is completely open there, okay? So it's not, the blood is not completely enclosed in vessels, okay? So we see that in arthropods and mollusks. So you might think back to things like clams, crayfish. I just kind of have a headache. So anyway, we have a heart with open-ended vessels. So the question becomes is, how does this blood going to do the gas exchange? The blood directly bathes cells, and basically its function is a type of fluid where the gases are going to be housed for a short period of time as they're moving outside or into the body. All right, so closed circulatory systems, as we already explained, means that the blood is completely enclosed in vessels. Okay, blood isn't leaking out unless there's some sort of injury or trauma. So the interesting thing about this is, yes, you should know, yeah, vertebrates have closed systems. Earthworms, you might remember that there are several hearts and a dorsal and ventral blood vessel. So hopefully that's coming to mind. Squids and octopus, so this is interesting, they are mollusks. And their relatives are actually going to use gills. Their relatives are actually going to use, they can have an open circulatory system like clams and mussels. But actual squid and octopus have closed systems, and that's one reason why they can be big, massive predators in the ocean and swim rapidly, is because they are more efficient at gas exchange. Okie dokie, just a little bit more to move a little bit further into the circulatory system. Thinking about the heart, typically there's a chambered heart, but its elaboration varies depending on the organism. We are going to focus on birds and mammals, which have the 4-chambered heart. So you might remember from a previous class, we have 2 chambers on top, and those are called the right atrium and the left atrium. Plural, we call that the atria. So those are the top chambers. The lower chambers are called the ventricles, or the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Okay. The right side of the heart, as you can tell from this figure, they're showing us in blue that this must be what we would call oxygen poor blood. And it's high in CO2. So that's typically how these figures are showing us whether blood is oxygenated or full of oxygen, which we can see over here on the right side of this figure, or whether it is deoxygenated or full of CO2, which we see on the left-hand side. So the right side of the heart, right atrium, right ventricle, handles the oxygen poor blood, and the left side of the heart handles the oxygen-rich blood. You're going to notice that at least in, actually in fetal development, there's some holes between the right and left sides of the heart, but that seals up very rapidly. And we have a partition between the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart, so blood doesn't typically mix right to left. It goes from top to bottom, okay? Occasionally there's a mixing from bottom to top, but generally the blood is coming into the heart from vessels and going from the atria to the ventricles and then back out the heart. Okay. All right, so vertebrate animals have what we call double circulation, despite whether they have a 4-chambered heart or not. And this means that there's a pumping of the heart and then to the lungs or gills. All right, so the fish is a little bit different. We'll go through that later. So we have single circulation in fish. So when it said earlier vertebrates have double circulation, what it should have said is some vertebrates have double circulation. But we see with fish that there's single circulation. So you see the blood is pumped to the heart only once. So it goes from the heart to the gills, back to the heart. Now the previous slide, you're going to see that the blood goes from the heart to the lungs, to the heart, to the body, okay? So this is the body, the systemic circuit. So it comes back to the heart from the body, then it goes to the lungs, and then it goes back to the heart, and then it exits the heart and goes to the body. So we just have a couple of minutes left in my video. You're going to do a lot more of this in lab and in class with me. So the pulmonary circuit, pulmonary means lungs. This is that part of the double circulation that goes from the heart to the lungs to the heart. It's taking CO2 to the lungs. You exhale that CO2, you inhale oxygen, it comes into the lungs, and it's going to go back to the heart so the left side of the heart can pump out that oxygen-rich blood. So that pumping out of the blood from the heart, then it goes to the body and back to the heart, is called the systemic circuit. System meaning the rest of the body. Okay, so there's a circuit to the lungs, a circuit to the body. So naming everything is going to be something that you end up doing in lab, and we'll complement that in lecture. So this is kind of where we're headed. It's not that hard once we break it down, but certainly there is some memorization involved. So what we'll be doing in Module 4 is going through some of the systems of the body. On the study guide, it's just going to have you review the major systems of the body. We will spend time talking about clearly the circulatory system, the respiratory system, the reproductive system, or the big systems that we talk about. So let me know your questions. And Friday in class, we will have the individual quiz. Again, it opens at 9:30. You have 15 minutes, finish it by 9:55, and join, and we'll do our team quiz together. Let me know if you have questions about this material, and have a good day.